Hi, I'm Mark Wintle and I'm the author of 6 fishing books. I'm going to just talk through the story of how I got to write those books and why. I'm going to start at the beginning, which was about 1999. At that time I'd got a lot of old magazines and books. I really was keen on my roach fishing, I still am, and I thought it would be a nice idea to put together a really top-class book on roach fishing. I started researching, it was easy to write. I had lots of my own experiences and soon found plenty of others' experiences to add to that. In time I talked to John Searle, who'd opened a shop in Ringwood, The Art of Angling. He put me in touch with Pete Rogers and John Bailey, someone else who'd written a book about roach fishing back in the 80s, and things were going well. When I approached some publishers though, only 2 out of about 6 or 7 were interested at all, and ultimately they said maybe there's not enough interest to sell enough copies to make it worthwhile. But they were encouraging. They said I could write well enough to do a book, maybe just not the right book. About 3 years later I started to write for Fishing Magic on the web. Graham Marsden, the editor, encouraged me, and soon I was writing every week. I was doing lots of photography, first in film and then quickly onto digital, which made life a lot easier for websites. And after 3 or 4 years, or a few years, I did a series about commercial fisheries, and that looked like the basis for a book, not a massive book, but there was nothing on the subject at the time. And we went to Crowwood, Graham and I went to Crowwood to see if they'd be interested, and they said yes, we'd like to do a book on pole fishing, so get rid of the other stuff, the method feeder and so on, just concentrate on pole fishing. You can expand it to include pole fishing on rivers and lakes, canals, as well as commercials. So we set to do that from about 2006 right through 2007. We got together to do photography. I did the writing, Graham did the photography, or most of it, and some editing to make sure that it all made sense. We delivered the book, and it came out in 2008, and I think we were pleased with it. Sold well, sold out a reprint, and it's still available second hand. And that's that book. About the only thing we were ever disappointed with it was the cover, which wasn't the best shot, but you live and learn. And we'd certainly learnt a lot from that book. Graham enjoyed doing it as much as I did, and he came up with the idea of doing a book on fairly straightforward carp fishing. We put that to Crowwood, they said yes, and we set to do that. For the cover we needed some good shots of 30-pound carp, so we went to France for a week. It rained for 4 nights and 4 days, and it was pretty hard going, but we did get a 30-pounder each, and so we got our cover shot of Graham holding a 35-pounder, and it was good fun. The book's still in print. It's not the greatest of carp books, but for any beginner it's a good grounding in carp fishing, and what's in there is as up to date now as it was then, because we looked at the basics. The basics never change in fishing. Graham enjoyed doing that. He was into his barbel fishing by then, and so we suggested doing much the same for barbel. So by 2010 we brought out a barbel book, Practical Barbel Fishing, which is still in print, still does quite well. Quite a nice straightforward book for those who want to fish for barbel. All the while I was trying to keep my hopes of doing my roach book alive, and I kept researching, I kept gathering photographs, writing on it, researching stories, getting new contacts. I went to Medlar in about 2004 or 5, and they said they were interested, but when they emailed me to say that, I never got the email because my email address had stopped, and I changed email address, so they went with Mark Everard instead, which was his book, The Complete Book of the Roach. In a way that was a good good thing, because I still needed to do more work on my roach book to get it how I really wanted it. So that the roach book was still in abeyance, but not forgotten. John Searle, in the meantime, had decided that he'd like to do a book on roach fishing, concentrating on the Avon, the Stour, the Froome, the Test, etc. called Chalk, and he brought out a book called Chalkstream Roach, The Ultimate Challenge. That came out in about 2010. Very nice book, very collectible, long sold out, so you'll struggle to find a copy anywhere, but if you do get one, it's worth buying. You'll pay a premium. It was never cheap at £35, and you'll probably pay a fair bit more than that. But it is still around if you're lucky to get one. In 2010 as well, I went with Peter Rolfe to the CLA Game Fair, where he was due to receive a conservation award for his work with crucian carp. He brought out a book called Crock of Gold, which I contributed a very small amount to, a super book on crucians, and well, the ultimate reference book for people for fishing for crucians and also developing crucian fisheries. And the important thing was that Peter had used a publisher called Empress, who I'd never heard of, and he suggested, as did Hugh Miles, who was there the same day, and another keen roach angler like myself, that I approach Empress regarding my roach book, which I did, and they said yes, they'd like to rename the book Big Roach rather than The Magic of Roach. And I set to work. By now I had all the material I needed, the photos, all the information and the stories, in fact too much. But Big Roach came out in the summer of 2011. It received very good press, and it sold out over a few years. It's now very, very scarce, very sought after. It was never a cheap book, but there's a terrific premium on it nowadays, and copies don't come up very often. Maybe 3 or 4 copies a year will come up for sale now. My secret stash in a box under the bed is empty, I'm afraid, so sorry. As I just said, there were lots of stories left over, and I pushed for a sequel, so Big Roach 2 came out 3 years later. There's a similar look to the 2 books, and that's no coincidence. I wanted the 2 books to look and feel the same quality, same number of pages. Both cover shots are by John Bailey, who wrote the foreword in the first one and the epilogue in the second one. John had always promised to write the foreword for me, and I kept him to his word. And I think he's very pleased he did. He thinks that the 2 roach books are the ultimate 2 roach books around, so I can't get higher praise than that as far as I'm concerned. Coming out of Big Roach 2, I've spoken to Linda Marks, who's the widow of Ivan Marks, because I wanted a little story about Ivan in that Big Roach 2, and John Essex, who sourced some historic pictures for me, and the idea came to me that I should do a biography of Ivan Marks and the Likely Lads, which was his team. And I set to work in 2014 doing that. Cliff Mulder at Empress agreed the idea of doing the book. He'd done a book of articles by Ivan Marks in 2011 that sold quite well, but this was a proper book written from the ground up, and I set to work quite quickly. The Likely Lads, I got them together in 2015, and the book came out at the end of 2015, Ivan Marks and the Likely Lads. And it was terrific fun writing this book. The Likely Lads are a lively bunch, to say the least, when you get them together. It's great fun being with them. They really enjoyed telling their stories, telling me about Ivan, what they had all got up to. They told me stories that unfortunately I couldn't print, but there you go. And we still have reunions every year. and keep in touch. So some friendships came out of that. That book's still available and still selling quite steadily, so that's one to look out for still. So that's about it. That's my 6 fishing books. Will I do any more? Maybe, if I come up with the right subject. But in the meantime, if you have got my books, I hope you've enjoyed reading them and learnt things from them. And I'll say goodbye.